Hello everyone and welcome to the results video for the last round, round 7 of the 2023 Spacechem tournament. This was the special computation round, and the puzzle this week was to correct Hamming codes. Now Hamming codes in this puzzle look like this. A ring of 8 atoms, 7 of them will either be Si or N, representing 1 or 0. For purposes of description, I'll refer to Si as 1 and N as 0, but it didn't matter for the puzzle. And then O is a stop token, just to make it a ring. So there's 8 of them. So 7 actual bits of data, and then 1 stop token. Now, Hamming codes have the property that bits 1, 2, 3, 5, bits 1, 2, 4, 6, and 1, 3, 4, 7. Each of those sets of 4 bits has to sum to an even number. So you could either have all n's for 0, 2 si's, and 2 n's for 2, or 4 si's for 4. And 1 and 3 would be incorrect and would not be permitted. So in this case, you can check them. We got 1, the first set, 1, 2, 3, 5. You can see that sums to 3, so that's wrong. The second set, 1, 2, 4, 6, also sums to 3, and that's wrong. But the final set, 1, 3, 4, 7, sums to 4, and that's fine. So nothing needs to be changed there, but we need to change a bit of this. And Hamming codes have this nice property that every set of every possible 7-bit long binary string is either Hamming code or is transformable into a Hamming code by flipping a single one of its bits. In this case, you'd have to flip, I think it'd be this bit, and then if you flip this bit, you'll get 1, for the first one, you'll get 1, 2, that's now a 0, so that's fine. 3, 4, that's, these two are still 1s, these two are now 0s, so that works. And then 1, 2, 4, 6, same thing happens. These two are still 1s, but these two are now 0s, so that's fine. And that's what you'd have to do. So just flip this SI to an N and output it as a unique Hamming code that's a distance 1 away from this non-Hamming code string. Now for you to do this, I gave you a very powerful reactor, so I gave you the maximum number of fusers and splitters, not expecting you'd need it, but I just want to account for any possible algorithm you're going to come up with. The restriction is not supposed to be Spacechem parts in this solution, it's supposed to be making an efficient algorithm. And then of course some good implementation on top of that, but I don't want to force people to do stuff with 2 bonders or something. And so maximum number of bonders, maximum number of swappers, and then if you go to that, 4 sensors as well, which is also the maximum number. And also gave you some just bond plus and just bond minus ones if they happen to be convenient. I didn't check if anyone used them, but just on the off chance that they were helpful. And really I wasn't expecting you to use all of these resources, perhaps just 4 sensors and maybe the 4 swappers. But sometimes you don't want 4 swappers, you want to swap something back and forth, say you're checking parity, and you want to, each time you get a 1, swap something between 2 different states. Then I provided an equivalent reactor with everything else the same, but 2 swappers, so you could do that as well. So I think that's everything I have to say to introduce the puzzle. If IEEE, you have anything to add?
Yeah, may want to show the delivery mechanism because
Okay, no, we'll now move on to the first solution by whoever 314.
I mean, you may want to show the output reactor.
Actually, you are very, very quiet.
Me or IEEE?
IEEE.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me now? Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we
Yes,
can hear
quite
you now.
well.
Yeah.
Okay, that's amazing. And yeah, I always have trouble with Discord. I meant that you may want to show the delivery mechanism because this is a computation puzzle, so there usually is some custom delivery mechanism, like this sits in the first reactor.
Of course. So for the first reactor, I gave you this reactor here, which will, if I put a pause there, it will take one input, deliver it, and then it will not take another input from the input pipe until it's received a molecule for the bottom pipe. And I required that this reactor be used to deliver to the output. So by the time your solution has come up with an output, pass it back to this reactor into the beta input. Then when it draws from beta and outputs it, then finally it'll take a new input. And I did this for a couple of reasons. For a cycles puzzle, it matters slightly more. And in the cycles puzzle, a computation round might want it because this is how it's more like how algorithms are designed in the real world. Often you think of time it takes to complete one input to one output rather than time it takes to run loads of inputs sequentially through a pipeline. But this was mostly symbol, so that was a secondary concern. The main concern was just to make it a bit simpler. So if people wanted to do things like timing, it makes it a bit simpler not having a continuous stream of inputs, but getting them one by one. And I felt it was appropriate and just made things a little bit easier for everyone.
This puzzle is about processing one input well and just one input, and not about throwing like 12 reactors at the problem, heavily parallelizing the whole thing.
Yeah.
And like this is just a choice puzzle makes for you. And may want to, before we go to the first solution, I just wanted to point out something. The validation for this puzzle is of course custom, as you can see from the overworld. Can you go to the overworld, exit the reactor? Okay. As you see from the overworld, this is not going to validate because the output on the output pipe makes no sense. You see, it's just a single atom, and you're putting in an innate ring. And for everyone that wants to, is watching this video in the years to come, the way this worked in the tournament is that there was a custom validation written on the Spacechem bot with the help of Jojo and Zig. We were able to get custom validation on, and this puzzle doesn't work as written here, but in magical bot land, inputs are substituted and things work out.
And for
so this needs heavy custom support to smoothly work.
For extra clarification, the input sequence contained one of every single. I didn't give anyone the input sequence when I made the puzzle, but the input sequence contained one of every possible input in a random order, but it would be a fixed random order, so it'll be the same for everyone, but I randomly generated it beforehand. Yeah, sorry about the technical difficulties early in the puzzle. We had unexpected difficulties with the bot side rather than Spacechem side, and we had a pretty terrible workflow where only I could edit the Spacechem and only IEEE could edit the bot, which made things quite awkward. But we got it there with a bit of help from Zig. So thanks, Zig.
Yeah, may want to mention yellow bunny's levels when we can get started.
Okay, and finally, thanks to Yellow Bunny, who helped the contestants out a lot, especially in the early parts of the round where the bot wasn't quite working yet, by providing a series of solution files that contained every single input between them. And for each solution file, all the inputs would produce the same output. So if you could run, so if your puzzle ran, then it would like actually run the solution. Whereas here, if I try and pass anything to this question mark output, it's going to crash. But Yellow Bunny actually substituted that with the correct output for all the inputs. So I imagine that was a big help to the contestants. And finally, we can move on to the first solution by whoever 314. I know, forgot to talk about the metric. So the metric this week was slightly weird, that it was a trade-off metric, which I don't really like generally. But it was necessary, I think, this week to stop having really slow solutions. The metric of firstly symbols, but then plus 15 times log base 10 of the amount of cycles. So that means that if your cycle count were to increase by a factor of 10, it would effectively cost you 15 symbols. And that was to stop people doing really slow solutions, because we being me and IEEE, suspected that people may be incentivized to have solutions that run for several tens of millions of cycles, which is really tedious for the contestant who's making it and annoying to validate as well. So we wanted to discourage that, and we think that the penalty of 15 symbols for tenfold increase in cycles worked fairly well at doing that.
Yeah, and like the last thing, you usually want to pair symbols with logarithm cycles. And you want to do that because, in some sense, every symbol you add causes your cycle count to drop geometrically when you are at very low symbol counts. So if you just add cycles plus symbols, you could not find a reasonable constant to do that. And so you need to apply some function on cycles that removes the inherent scale. And for people that like math, you know that logarithm is a function that does that. So this has been seen in many computational puzzles where you want some trade-off metric and you have at your disposal symbols, reactors, and the logarithm of cycles. And I dare say this worked reasonably well. We will see, of course, as we go on, but we don't have exceedingly slow solutions, which I think is the metric has accomplished what we wanted it to do. So we can get in.
Yeah, and finally, as the solution so starting with the solution, I gave you a large number of reactors to play with. I gave you 8. I thought this would be fine for symbols, because a very good solution probably doesn't want to use 8 reactors worth of symbols. So giving you a lot would make it easier for people to just get a solution out, and it won't affect the top end of the scoring, because the top end of the scoring are going to be using maybe 2 or 3 extra reactors anyway. So, but for this first
That's very nice of you.
For this first solution, whoever uses 6 extra reactors plus the one that he had to, and that makes it quite conceptually simple, which is nice. So we're going to start this first reactor by building this indicator stick. So this stick is successive powers of 2 times 14 for the silicon. So that's 1, 2, 4. And now you can if you want to, you can fuse this all together, and that will act like a binary indication uniquely for each possible set of parity bits being flipped. Also, so you got each set of parity bits, and I'll indicate true or false, whether it's correct or whether it's needs fixing for each set of parity bits. So that will be 3 bits, 3 things you need to test, and for 3 things you need to test, that's 3 yes or no's, a binary number. So a binary number can be represented by 3 powers of 2, in this case 1, 2, and 4, and fuse these all together, and then you'll get a unique element out for each of the possible 8 results. And whoever starts by reforming the input into this shape, I assume just for convenience it probably made something slightly simpler later on. And now each of their next 3 reactors is going to check for a different one of the 3 parity groups. Since checking, and if it just as you'll see, many solutions do, moving this input as a block over sensors and to sensor different bits, see what they are, which is something that's pretty common in computation solves. And it's doing and undoing this bond here whenever it sees a SI, and that sets its parity. Also, it's doing and undoing this bit here, sorry. And this bond here, when it's 1, when it's full, it will indicate that it got it wrong. So that will indicate a incorrect set of parity on that first quadruplet. Now it's going to do the same in the next reactor, but with the second. So it's going to do it with this bond. And then that second one also wrong, so that's set. And finally, it's going to check the last bit, last party group, sorry. And that one is fine, so it doesn't bond the barium to the block. Now the barium's unbonded, and if these weren't attached, they would have also been unbonded, leaving only the incorrect bits attached. The incorrect bits are then fused into a nitrogen, and as I said before, that any combination of fusing those 3 bits, because they are successive powers of 2, will lead to a unique identifier here. So now this identifies a unique set of parity bits that are wrong. Set of parity groups that are wrong. Now what the final reactor is going to do is it's going to, whoever cleverly realized that each possible 8 states of parity bits being wrong or right would lead to a different unique bit that needs to be flipped. So if they were all right, then that corresponds to 0, so that's nothing being flipped, and then the other 7 possibilities correspond to one of the bits being flipped. And that's because if you look at the parity groups for a while, you'll see that, say for example, 1 is in 3 different parity groups. So if 1 is wrong, then flipping one will change the parity of all three of those groups, and that will switch it over. Then 2, 3, and 4 are all in 2 each, and there are different 2 each. So that would make, so flipping one of those, each one of those would flip those 2 bits, but it would flip those 2 parity groups. And then 5, 6, and 7 are all in each in one party group each. So if you've only got one party group wrong, you can flip one of those, and then it will uniquely change that party group. And that's the kind of basic algorithm that a lot of solutions will use. And this is what whoever does. So now we've got this sensor right at the top, and it's looking for the what their indicator element is, and then its indicator element, depending on what that is, it will know which bit it needs to flip, grabs it by the bit it needs to flip, and then it can detect whether it's nitrogen or silicon. If it's silicon, then it's going to split out a nitrogen of silicon to make nitrogen, and that's flipped. If it was instead silicon, if it was instead nitrogen, it would run over this in beta and input a nitrogen, which would be fused into it to make a silicon, and then that would flip a nitrogen. Finally, the output's moved up here.
By the way, the encoding of 1 and 0 was made this way to be easy to do all this.
Yeah.
So if you know, if the encoding was 7 and 37, it would have been horrendous.
Yeah.
And that's not part of the puzzle.
Yes, nitrogen and I like nitrogen and silicon as 1 zeros. I used them before in a different puzzle because they are a factor of 2 from each other, and they're fairly low elements, and they're different colors, so they're identifiable easily. It's kind of annoying in Spacechem for this purpose that different color elements with the same number of bonds, the same valency, have the same color, but silicon and nitrogen I think only differ by 1, so it's not the worst case. And then when that's done, it's passed back to the start reactor, which takes it and outputs it. For this puzzle, I decided to allow isomorphisms of the output, which not all computation rounds do. And I decided this just because I thought it would make it a little bit easier, and it would allow people to do things like this, or squashing the output into a different shape, which I saw no reason to not allow.
Yeah, because usually in a computational puzzle, it matters what orientation your output is in because it communicates information. But in this puzzle, it's all about distance from the oxygen. So it matters much less. It matters much less.
Apart from like, flipping it around.
Yeah, flipping.
But that I didn't think would be useful, and it wasn't.
Yeah, if you could solve, half of it by flipping, but it's gonna be easier to just implement the full algorithm than to implement, because flipping and arming code doesn't really, flipping doesn't cut in half your the stuff you need to do, so it doesn't matter. We discussed about this, I remember. So yeah, guys, this time you got isomorphism. We are not usually that nice. Did you lose it?
That's over there. There. And it's going to do the same for the next input. This time it ends up slightly differently, so it's only going to keep this nickel. Only nickel needs to be flipped. I Yeah, not entirely sure why they split the silicon. Maybe it's that it adds up to more than 102 or 100 and is it 109 actually? That's the maximum if you have everything fused into a silicon. I didn't think it would, but anyway.
That's 14 times 8, which is no, it's not. It's 104. So I'm not super sure about that. Yeah, we need to think about it a little bit. Oh yeah, no, there is aliasing. If you do it that way, there is aliasing between 0 and 2. Sorry, between between like you risk, because that's a silicon, you risk it messing up. I think at least.
I'm not sure. Maybe you risk messing up a sensor somewhere later.
I'm not sure actually, because no, it's not gonna give you aliasing because it's just a shift. So sorry, I misspoke, and I'm not sure about that. Maybe he was thinking about throwing that nitrogen into this reactor, but it's just easier to pull from the input. Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
Maybe there was a practical reason that it messes up one of these sensors if you switch them all to silicons, but I don't know. Anyway, congrats whoever on getting this solution. Pretty neat and understandable solution.
Yeah, like this puzzle is hard, so just making a solution is truthfully paying of congratulations, and overall this is nice to explain what's happening. So before we start seeing some stuff that encodes complex concepts, we will see them. That encodes information in things that are hard to see.
Yes.
Let's go on.
Up next we have Fox decimal. And Fox decimal demonstrates one reason why we needed the log cycles thing. So Fox decimals was quite a bit slower than most other people.
All right. Yeah.
I can't. My computer's being too slow at the moment to see the scores.
Yeah,
so
let me get to
the like a factor of 2 slower than everyone else at least.
Yeah, it's not terribly slow though. So even this is the slowest solution we have, and even this one, it's not even 10 times slower than the fastest solution. So the gap between fastest and slowest is like a factor of 5 or so, which is pretty good.
But then if you were to very highly simple optimize the same approach, I think you would end up having a lot less reactors, and you'd end up with a much higher cycle count than this got.
Yeah, I don't even want to know what the solution were like if we didn't give log cycles. And I don't want to know. Please do not make a solution for
But I'd be worried they look like highly optimized versions of this. And how this works is it's going to sequentially try flipping each bit and checking it's right.
This reminds me of Molecular Foundry, you know.
Yeah, Andy's.
If people are familiar with the low symbol solution of Molecular Foundry, it does this and it takes forever. Yeah, so we are.
This is not the start reactor, I don't think. This is a bit
I would hope not.
confusing because it'll go in a circle. That's the start reactor. So first it's just going to take an input and pass it straight onto the next reactor. Then what this reactor is going to check power to groups 1 and 2. And if power to groups 1 and 2 are both... So power to group 1 it's okay. It goes round again. I think it's not actually checking 1 and 2, it's checking, I think it does 3 first by the order I gave them in. So party group 3 is okay, then it's going to check either party group 1 or 2, I can't remember, but it checks one of them, and then it will put the output molecule in a different place depending on whether they were both right or at least one of them was wrong. And so to the right, this one's got at least one of them was wrong. In this case, it was the second one it checked, and then it outputs it. So this next reactor, if it had got 2 rights, so the first 2 groups it checked would be right, it would grab here with this red and then just output it to the next reactor. I know that's wrong, sorry. If they had got 2 No, if it had got 2 rights, it would have grabbed it with red, and then blues would have done this sensing at the top, and that would have detected which whether it's right or wrong. But in this case, it was placed in the right, which meant it's got a wrong. So in this case, blue doesn't care at all. It's just going to go straight down and grab it and move it along to the next reactor. So it already knows it's wrong. It's been wrong for at least one of the groups, so it knows that this molecule as a whole is wrong, and it's not going to bother doing any more checking on it. Now it's going to start just decomposing this into a stream of single atoms. This can be quite a good technique for these computation puzzles that give you the atom in a ring. It can be quite useful to turn it into a string of bits, because then all the bits look the same spatially when they come out. This can simplify your code in the next reactor quite a bit, but it's often
It's often very, very slow.
It's often very, very slow and annoying to do, and in this case costs a few symbols to do. Now finally, this reactor is going to swap one of the bits. Or more correctly, it's going to swap 2 of the bits, but do nothing if one of the bits it tries to swap is an oxygen. So in this case, it's just going to swap the first bit, because the actual first bit it tried to swap was an oxygen, and it can't swap an oxygen.
Right, so there is a 7 counter, there is an 8 counter here, I guess, which is all these flip-flops, right? Yeah, because you need to keep track of which one you're going to swap.
Yes. And I think that's an 8 counter that gets offset by 1 each time it goes through, because it only goes through it 7 times.
Right, because
it tries to swap
yeah,
2.
effectively you need either a 7 or a 9 count. Because you essentially need to count to 56 at least. Yeah, because you need to swap. You need to see them all, and then you need to swap one of them. So it's 8 for the atoms you see, and then 7 for the swap count. So 56.
Yeah. But you need to swap 2 of them each time, because you need to swap back the one you swapped last time.
Right.
So I think it's an 8 count, but it only goes through it 7 times, so it ends up getting offset by 1. I believe that's how it works. Anyway.
This is not going to be fast.
It's not fast.
So we are going to reassemble it. Yeah, here it is.
And then
we'll send it back.
Yeah, do the thing again.
Yeah, this is obscenely slow. And it's of course not completely optimized for being slow because it's not terrible, but you could easily see a variation on this being 10 times slower, 50 times slower.
If you cut the amount of reactors, then you'd end up with huge piles everywhere because you haven't got the space to have the tight loops that this about manages to have. Yeah, this time it puts it in the bottom left, which corresponds to both atoms, both powder groups being correct. And it's going to grab it, but with red this time, and blue is going to do some sensing to tell.
Are we lucky this time, or are we not?
I think we might be lucky this time. It should go around twice. No, we're not lucky.
That's very sad.
I think we might be lucky next time, though. Oh, no, we were. Okay.
Oh, we were lucky. That's great.
Okay, I'll just...
That's like the first time I'm happy level crashes.
No, I think this time we're lucky. It's going to... It's alright. Now, this time blue is going to be on this track and get to the bottom here. When it's here, it outputs inputs an oxygen, and the oxygen is going to act like a stop/reset token. So that tells it the system is done, and the stop token is passed on, and the now completed output, correctly checked, is going to be moved to the output, and this will go back to the first reactor to send it to the output. Then we can follow the stop token.
Yeah, blue will pick it up.
And the stop token is just going to tell it all to reset.
Okay, so all those sensors will prime the flip-flops, right? So they will reset the counter, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay, makes sense. It's...
Yeah. You think that's a lower symbol approach might end up going round another however many times, however many bits, so in this case another 6 times. But I don't know, maybe that's hard to do with Spacechem logic. It sounds like the kind of thing you'd struggle to do.
Yeah, instead of putting out the reset token, you could have had red go around and around and around and around until it came back. And I'm sure that's doable, and I'm sure that takes like 3 times as much. So thank you, log cycles. And also thank you, Foxodecimal, because it's still an ingenious solution.
Yeah, Foxodecimal was, I think, the fastest solve to come in, not fastest in running, obviously. So nice job on fastest gun, and yeah, good job on the solve. No one else did it this way. Nice job with a unique method. So this one, I didn't really understand. I didn't get a write-up for this one.
Okay, so what are we looking?
Quite a hard
It's just 2 reactors. How hard could it be? That colorful stick looks like whoever's, where he encodes signals into, oh god.
Yeah, this is going to...
So he has rejiggered the input. I'm not sure what this assembly does. It likely makes the thing easier to sense.
Possibly, I'm just trying to check what it's rejiggering, because there are certain combinations that you'll see later that make the problem easier, but this does a lot of rejiggering, and it was I couldn't tell what exactly it's
I
trying to
cannot
do.
tell. I mean, it rejiggers it. I assume this is because it wants some nicer sensor pattern on the way out, but I can't even tell where each piece has gone. Because now it's rejiggered again and again, and it's split into fragments and things are done. Okay, go on.
I can tell you that that's a parity flipper, so it flips parity each time it hits an N if it passes over these in successive cycles. So maybe that's what a lot of the rejiggering was to do, to get sets of items that was possible to pass over sensors in successive cycles.
Yeah, I guess he has put the blocks of bit into a square, like the 4 small squares in the input are now checks.
Yes, that would make sense. That would necessitate putting the middle atom as what started as atom 1, and that's how, if you read up on Hamming codes, I know Gigi was saying they found a different way of doing it, which we'll see a couple of people use, but a lot of the literature uses Hamming codes where my 1 was 4, and that probably for symmetry properties.
Okay, and he has built a parity indicator. This
parity indicator.
CMC is clearly a parity indicator. And he is going to do something that I'm not sure I understand.
I'm not sure either, but yeah, this one was very hard to understand without a write-up, so I neglected it a bit in favour of trying to understand the ones that did have a write-up. And now it's going to reverse what it did earlier. So I guess this process must be symmetric, whatever it is. Or not entirely symmetric, because it's last time it swapped stuff off. But now
exactly. This is some complex transformation that works out. I cannot tell what the transformation is.
Yeah, so we are unfortunately not able to tell you why that works.
Yeah, it may even use reflection. What do you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, what's clear that it's building a parity.
I'm not sure reflection would ever be useful, because you have 3 bits of each type and then 1 bit of the final type, so there's no way you could have 7 be symmetrical to have. You can't have 2 on one side and 1 on the other side, then it's not symmetrical. There's no way to make it symmetrical like that, which is why I thought symmetry wouldn't be useful, but maybe.
Yeah, you know, that rejiggering is complex enough that I cannot really tell. But yeah, in any case, once the parity stick is made, I guess here it's written by the sensors on blue that decide which bit to move.
Yes, so it's probable that the rejiggering also makes it nicer to detect which bit to move, because this doesn't look like it's disambiguating between 8 different states. I think it surely must be, because it doesn't transform any of the arrangement of the input molecules based on checks. So I think it must switch between the 8 different states, but it's the same algorithm we've seen before, I believe, but it's mixed up the states in such a way that it's both easy to test them all and then easy to find the right bit to flip.
Yeah, at least I hope it's easy. But it looks pretty. I mean, if this reactor doesn't look too bad, so it must.
Yeah, it doesn't look too bad, but it's low on the sensor count, so unless it's doing a huge amount of grab drop sensing. Anyway, I think we'll move on to Norris Fat Jam, who drop a bit in symbols down to 158.
Yeah. So with a difference by a factor of 5 between the fastest and the slowest solution, this means that the spreading contribution of a cycle's part is less than like 10. So this is mostly a symbol competition. Of course, it is a symbols competition because we are capped the amount of cycles you can use.
Yeah,
Okay, so
Norris Fat
we've made the
Jam,
pancake.
yeah, also decided to make the flat set, which turns out to be quite nice for them, and we'll see why in a bit.
Yellow Bunny says that this solutions uses the minus only bonders.
This one.
Yeah.
Ah,
Because yeah, you
so
see
does,
that's a minus only bonder. Yeah, it does that to avoid a spurious bond in the pancake. I guess they were useful after all.
Yeah, not only were they useful here, they're also useful in my reactor 3, as you'll see when you get there. I'll just say that much.
That's a nice spoiler. Thank you. So you wanna tell us what is it doing?
Oh, what is which doing?
I mean the thing.
Oh, I wrote this up for Jojo, and I'm gonna have to run here pretty quick. But basically, we're testing pairs to see if they're the same, and if they're different, then it's an odd result, and you just swap the nitrogen up top to the lower position, and if it's output from the lower position, it means it was odd parity.
Yeah. So this reactor I've just managed to find my notes. This reactor is going to test each of the 3 different parity groups, and it's going to do that testing in pairs. So I think this is the first time we see this. So with a pair, you can test if they're both the same, then it's an even contribution. If they're both different, then it's an odd contribution. So that makes it slightly simpler in that you're checking less things over, moving things over less times. It would be very powerful, especially in the cycles approach, but it is useful in the symbols approach to slightly simplify your solution. And I guess the making a pancake was quite convenient to do that with. The placement of this nitrogen up here, so it's going to output 3 nitrogens, and the placement of it will determine the parity. Now we can create these nitrogen and phosphorus sticks. As Anime said, phosphorus is for past, nitrogen is for not past.
Yeah, that's great.
And a neat thing about how they use the pancake in this solve is that if the first bit, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think first bit is bit on the right here.
Yeah, that's correct. You
Yeah,
got to go
so
from right to left
right
for
to
this
left,
part of it.
yeah. Right,
Even though I wrote it up the other way, but yeah.
Yeah. Right, sort of rightmost bit and this 3 will indicate whether it should be this way up. So it will indicate whether it's one of the first 3 bits to flip, or whether it's one of the last 4 bits to flip. So going to flip it over because this was a phosphorus. So the first one was a 1, so we know it's going to be in these 3 bits here. Now finally, having done that, the next 2 bits also have nice properties. If you get a 1 here and a 0 here, which you do in this case, you know it's this atom on A2 that needs to be flipped. If you get the other way around, so you get 1 here and 0 here. What I just said? Sorry, it's confusing, it's written the other way. If this one's a 1, a phosphorus, and this one's nitrogen, then it's the atom on B2, which will be that one. And if this one is a nitrogen and this a phosphorus, then it would be the one on A2. And that will happen through both flips, so that was a very neat thing for them to notice. In this case, it's just going to detect the first 2 bits, and now it detects that one needs to be flipped, so it's going to flip it. It grabs it by the bit it needs to flip, pulls that bit out, and uses this little loop here to flip it, and now goes across here and uses this sensor array of oxygens to tell when it needs to go up, because it could have grabbed it by any of these 4 bits depending on what it had grabbed and what it had flipped. And that's good to output.
Yeah, and this is the other spot where we used a negative bonder at the top of the bonding T. F4, I think that is. And I had to choose where the bonding error would happen, because the pancake, there's no avoiding it, and it was easier to correct them when it's an edge case, on the edge of the rectangle. So negative bonder there, and then you have to fix that at the end with the bond minus and bond plus on blue over on the far wall.
Yes. I guess because you could... Oh yeah, you generally don't want to make that bond, but you need to break it if you're on the edge, and then you need to reform it. But sometimes, but because you've put a bond line, say you're not always going to reform it, so you need to fix it up here. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly right.
Like you could do it in other ways. You could do a reverse. You form it every time, then you break it if you don't need it, but you need more bonders to that.
Yeah. And the remaining cases, so if you get 1, 1 or 1, 0, then you're going to need to do some more testing, which is what these sensors here do. You're going to need to test the other bits. Specifically in the 1, 1, 1 case, you end up needing to retest everything.
No,
This one is 0, 0, 0, so that needs to test here. So test the final bit. and if it rolls phosphorus, it'll grab here. If not, it's going to grab at the top. The 0 case corresponding to it's already correct, just output it. And change that. This is the 111 case, so there's some quite annoying sensing needs to be done to get over to here. I think that's because that it needs to go down this one if it's one. Yeah, so this one will be 1, that'll be 1 again, and then 1 for final one, but that's, let me actually go back to that.
Well, there has to be a delay before I test the final bit because of the 100 case. There's a sensor at C3, and there's a 1 cycle delay there. So I had to push the sensor over to the right one. Also, that sensor's at F7, it has dual use, so it needed to be over 1. But that delay means that I can't go straight up at C in the case of the 1-1.
Okay, I see. So you're delaying, so you have to go all the way back here to test it and then back up. Okay, that makes sense.
It's unfortunate because it means I have to duplicate symbols on the red Waldo, the bond plus and bond minus on the red Waldo going around. I have to put a duplicate 2 cycles later because of that. I tried like heck to figure out a way around it, but I couldn't do it.
So this bond minus here and bond plus here are only the 111 case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes.
So that's quite a little bit annoying, but thanks for pointing that out.
Oh yeah, no worries.
So nice job to Nos Fatjam on this solve. Very nice job finding this pancake slightly symmetry. I think you also said there's an extra rotation you have to do for special case one of the something in the second reactor. Was that correct?
Sorry, I pulled away for a second. Yeah, there is the special case when the leading bit is a 1, where if it's 100, you have to special case that out.
Yeah. So if the leading bit's a 1 and then it's 00, that's a special case, which is a little bit annoying, but everything else fits that nice pattern of collapse. By doing this, you've almost collapsed the states into half what people doing the more naive method would have to check. So nice job.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Yellow Bunny, who's got quite a complicated solution. So Yellow Bunny is the first to notice a special property of Hamming codes that I didn't know about. Apparently, Gigi Gore also found this from studying the Wikipedia page. But they noticed that in this order, there isn't that much symmetry you can abuse. I mean, this order of checking bits 1, 2, 3, 5, and so on with the other 2 party groups. But Yellow Bunny is the first to notice that if you swap the bits 4 and 5, you get something that's much nicer to deal with. In fact, you get it such that if party groups 1, 2, and 3 now move to their new versions, the same, but for the purpose of the algorithm, it's going to check them in the new places, but it is checking what originally were those three parity groups that it had. So now parity group 1 is going to correspond to a shift of 4, party group 2 is going to correspond to a shift of 2, and party group 3 is going to correspond to a shift of 1, away anti-clockwise around the loop. So, for example, in this case, we have party groups 4 and 2 both being, party groups 1 and 2 both being incorrect. So that's going to correspond to a shift of 2 a shift of 4 plus 2 anti-clockwise. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that will work provided that the 4th and 5th atoms are switched from the order they are given in the puzzle for any combination. So now you just need to decode that binary string, and that will directly give you a position. You don't need to sense each case individually. You can just do it by addition. And how Yellow Bunny does this is for some rotations, and for this it's probably easiest to see if you were to draw out the numbers again. If you were to draw out the molecule and name all the different positions, but what ends up happening is that both party groups both party groups 2 and 3 end up being rotationally symmetrical by a factor of 2. So if you rotate the molecule twice around, you end up with groups of atoms you're sensing in exactly the same place. So for example, for party group 3 ends up being these 4 atoms here. So these two, if you rotate it twice, get swapped with these two, and it's the same thing. So atoms in the same place. The same with parity group 2. Parity group 2 will now be these 4. So this one, and this one. Rotate it twice around, you get the same thing. And then parity group 1 will end up being this first 4 atoms here, and these are symmetrical by rotating it through 90 degrees. So these two rotated through 90 degrees become these two. And these are some of the strategies that Yellow Bunny is going to use to make their solution. So first they're going to swap out these 2 atoms. And reform it in the next reactor. This reactor is going to search for the first parity set. So this is going to check the first 4, and if it detects the first 4 being wrong, it will, which it is in this case, it's going to rotate it through 180 degrees, and then it can output it. Now after rotation through 180 degrees, as we said before, the other 2 parity groups are identical. They're symmetric through 180 degrees. So the next set of sensors you pass it over, whether it's parity groups 2 or 3, does not care about it's agnostic to whether that rotation has happened or not. Furthermore, rotating it by twice is the same as shifting the counter by 4, because if you've got 8 and you've shifted it by half, you are now 4 away from you started. So that's adding the 4 in implicitly just from that rotation. Next, it's going to check party group 2. And this up here is just a party checker, so in this case, party group 2, also incorrect, and this time it's going to rotate it by 90 degrees. And that 90 degrees equivalent as 180 degrees is to adding 4, 90 degrees is equivalent to adding 2, but also party group 3 is not just symmetrical in 180 degrees, it's also rotationally symmetrical in 90 degrees, around every 90 degrees. So group 1, it was only symmetrical on 2 sides by 1 rotation of 90 degrees, but party group 3 is going to correspond to the atoms now not on the corners. It's going to be all the middle atoms of each side. So that's equivalent when you rotate it through 90 degrees. So this atom that's coming through now can have been rotated by 90 degrees, any combination of yes or no for a rotation of 180 degrees and a rotation of 90 degrees, and that gives you all 4 possible states at this point. So if it was correct, it would be right way up. If it was yes, no, then if it was no, yes, sorry, it'll be 1 rotation. Yes, no, it'll be 180 degrees, and in this case, no, no, it's rotated 180 plus 90, so 3 rotations around 270 degrees. Finally, this reactor here is going to do the last party group. And so it's going to rotate it 4 times round, or sense 4 things, rotate it 3 times, and that will check each of the different sides, and in this case it found it was correct, so it moves the whole thing down by 1 if it using this oxygen over the sensor. For if it was an odd parity, it'll be over here, but even parity it ends up there. And that's done. So it'll end up down 1 if it's correct, and in the top, and up if it's wrong. And now that is like adding the 1 at the end. So now Yellow Bunny has collapsed all the states into a unique atom. So it will always be the atom in that one place. In this case, it's so it's this atom. So it ends up this atom here. The atom that ends up on A2 will always be the one that needs to be flipped. And then the rest of the work in this reactor is just determining whether that atom is silicon, nitrogen, or oxygen. And when that's done, it just outputs it and swaps the atoms form 5 again. And then in this reactor, it's going to bond, doesn't swap back to form 5 to their original place to be compatible with my my atom ordering. And output. I have been told that this atom ordering is the atom ordering that one of the related Wikipedia pages to Hamming codes and Hamming correction uses. So that's maybe where Yellow Bunny got inspiration. But I've also seen Hamming codes, when I've seen them before, they generally put what my atom 1 is in the 4th position, and that I imagine have similar nice properties to this. I put it in position 1 to give a nice memorable order for the contestants, but this ordering turns out to be more convenient for actually doing an algorithm, and it has an astonishing amount of nice properties with all the symmetries, as well as the fact that that the parities sum to the correct output. So, it's pretty incredible that works, even. I don't imagine the symmetries are useful apart from in something like Spacechem, so very neat that it worked. And also makes me glad I didn't choose the flat output, the flat input as my normal input shape, because then the rotations wouldn't have worked so nice. This time we're going to flip a nitrogen, so it grabs it by the atom that it wants to flip, goes over here, and inputs and immediately fuses another nitrogen to make it a silicon. Goes over. Now it's going to... It can come in at any order, so now it's got to do this loop here to reset it so that the oxygen's in the top left. And output. So very nice job, Yellow Bunny, on finding a quite incredible algorithm to solve this problem. So yeah, if you have anything to add?
This is going a bit over my head. It's probably because it's very late here.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, it's quite hard to explain. As I said in the chat, it took me the best part of the last hour before the stream to work out how this solution and others like it worked. Exactly. But very nice job. It's definitely much easier. I didn't see it until I actually got out pen and paper and started writing down what the different parity groups look like on the molecule once you swapped groups 4 and 5, swapped atoms 4 and 5. Next up we have Darvish. So first Darvish is going to do some sensing, and it's going to count for each silicon it gets. It's going to add 1 to this growing ball, so that ends up 70, which is 5 times 14, so it has an initial seed, and then for each silicon it detects from now on, it's going to add 1 to it. And in this case, barium is going to correspond to 3, and that's a bit that needs to be flipped. ytterbium is going to be 4, so that's a bit that's safe. Barium minus 14, element 42 is going to also be safe. 42 minus 14, 28 is going to be something that needs to be flipped as well, whatever element 28 turns out to be. And everything else is going to be nickel. So nickel and barium are what we're looking to indicate stuff being flipped. And I'm really sorry, Darius, even with your write-up, I couldn't work out how this second reactor actually decided to output. Darius was another person who noticed the adding property. So the property that pad to group 1 corresponds to adding 4 and group 2, 2 and 3, 1, going backwards from the oxygen, or going anti-clockwise from the oxygen. And so I assume, and because I spoke about it, I assume this uses that in some way, but I couldn't work it out. Maybe if Darius is listening and answers my question in the chat, I typically could read that and point it out.
Yeah, he said 1 sec, so he's probably about to write some novel. And the only thing is that here it's getting very late, and I'm likely going out. So before I fall asleep at the computer, I will not spoil the result, but I wanted to say congratulations to the guy that won, which I will guess you will get at in an hour or so. And thank you, Jojo, for hosting the tournament.
No problem.
I will see you guys, well, hopefully next year. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
1, 2, 3, can you hear me?
Hello, I can hear you.
Hello, 1 second. Okay, I'm here. So, let me explain how the thing works. Reset please and run until we input the first bit. Okay. So, as you see on A5, we have sync. After blue hits and passes the sync, it checks whether we see nickel or barium. If we do, this means that we have already inputted a new molecule, and we are currently sensing 1. 1 meaning nickel or barium. If we pass this, we then come to A8, where we check whether or not it is oxygen. Essentially, we are mixing together 2 different checks. We could also immediately check for oxygen after the sync, which is going to happen even if it's not nickel or barium. But the way it ended up being, it's convenient to check for nickel and barium between zinc and oxygen. So anyway, if we see nickel or barium, we go and pass 1 zinc. Then, after we passed this 1 zinc, we shift the 3 atom molecule by 1. Meaning we are now working with the second atom. This is the second atom. When we hit the second atom, we come up on E8. On E8, as you can see, we again no, E8.
E8. Hi.
Okay, yeah, yes. As you can see, we then pass the nickel check on E6, and then barium check on C5. Either of those, if we hit either of those, we then pass through 2 things. Then Do you see what I'm talking about?
So okay, so I've missed a input. So if I do, would that make it better?
Probably. Okay,
Yes.
so
Okay. That's probably why I wasn't understanding. I was missing the first.
okay, okay. Pause. At the start of the red, we have two things. The first thing is to activate the blue, and the second thing is so we are stalling when we have the correct molecules. We don't need to change anything. So since if everything is correct, we don't need to debond and change anything. So red is currently waiting. And blue is doing its work of going through the three atoms in the lower molecule. So on the first atom of the three atom indicator molecule, it checks on A6 at A7, and if it hits, it goes through one thing. Then it shifts the indicator molecule by one, and now works with the second atom. As you can see, it is currently on the second atom, and it has currently hit the barium sensor, meaning it will now pass through two things. Okay.
And
okay, it is okay. Now it is shifted once again and is waiting on the third atom. Now, if it hits barium or nickel, barium check on J6 and nickel check on H3. If it hits either of those, yes, that was it. If it hits either of those, it then passes through forcing, meaning that depending on the composition of the indicator molecule, we are passing through between 0 and 7 sinks. Either way, when the blue... Okay, continue. Continue until until blue hits the bond minus on F7. Which will be soon.
F7. Okay. And now we know we're not doing anything, so we're just counting things.
Yes, okay. Now we are discarding the indicator molecule, and we now know that red is currently waiting on the correct place. So blue debonds the atom, correctly handles it, meaning splits or fuses depending on what we need to do, puts it back into place, rebonds, and continues onwards. Now, and it hits sync. Then, if we aren't finished, and we usually won't be at this place, it will just emptily go from sync, hit the hit the oxygen sensor, see that no, we don't see oxygen, meaning that we aren't on the new molecule, and return to the sync. And that's pretty much it. One interesting thing is that I wanted to point out is that, as you can see, we are special casing the fourth and fifth atom handling on with the sensor on D3. Because instead of the beautiful order 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, we need to go in the order 7, 6, 4, 5, 3, 2, 1. So to invert this, we have this ugly construction with sensor, then flip-flop, then sync, and a bunch of arrows on top of that.
Yeah. So you're doing your counting in binary by counting sinks rather than the previous solution which did it by rotations. Correct?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense now. Now it's done, so it just needs to So yeah, thank you for that, Darius.
Mhm.
Anything to add on the first reactor as well? This one seemed a little bit simpler, so
Well, not really. Well, maybe okay. One thing, I initially tried to do the standard 4 reactor, 4 flip-flop, no, 2 flip-flop setup, meaning, no, well, 2 to the power of 2, meaning we need 2 flip-flops. But it surprisingly turned out that doing 4 flip-flops in a row is actually easier. Also, at one point, I had the best solution not being the lowest symbol, not being the lowest symbol, because the latest symbol save ended up being so slow that I lost over 1 metric point on slowness.
yeah,
It was painful.
painful, but I think necessary for the competition to have that feature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having to revert to the previous larger solution.
Yeah, thank you, Darius, for your aid in explaining that. So very well done
You're
on
welcome.
finding the summing to the binary sum system, and then annoyingly having to do that special casing for outputs 4 and 5. Very well done in finding that and putting it to good use. Next up, we have Darius 1. Okay, Darius 1 is going to take things back to the simpler approach that we saw before, but it's just going to do things in a very efficient way. So this big loop on red here is going to move the input over all the bonders to check parity, and it's pretty neat spatial reasoning to work out essentially special casing everything. And working out such a low symbol way to special case everything and make sure you not got something on two sensors at the same time. Must have taken quite a while for Darius 1 to work this out. But how it decides what parity something has is it's between these two different locations. So I'm not sure which one, but right and wrong correspond to either top or bottom. I think wrong is top and right is bottom. We'll confirm when we get into next reactor. Now it's tested all 3 different parity here. Now when it's tested all 3 parity groups, like we just saw, it output and moves on to reactor 2, which I will just not sure there's a good place for sync here. I don't think so. A poll, sorry. So yeah, this one, first group it checked was wrong. So it has it pointing upwards, so there's one here, and the middle one is always there. Next one also wrong, also sticking upwards. And then the last one was right, so sticking downwards. Now it's going to use this sensor here, it's on top of now, to detect, and this sensor ray on blue up here to detect 8 different possibilities. Or it's going to start with just sensing the first 2, which it does. So this time it was, both of them were 1s, so it's going to pass along here. And at the same time it's going to fuse some of the silicons into nickel. You'll always make this because there'll always be a free long chain in the middle, so that nickel's always going to be made and left over that sensor. Red just moves that into place. And red's going to start moving this. And it moves it enough until blue will come and get it. And then blue will get it in the right place to do that. And we'll... So again, it's a solution that... Disconnect. Again, it's a solution that grabs the molecule in a specific place relative to the atom it wants to change. It does so on this one. And red's going to... We didn't see it very much there because it only went through it twice. But red's going to go around this loop here until such a time that blue has decided it wants to grab it and then grabs it. Red's going to continuously shift the molecule around.
I gotta drop. It's been a great pleasure doing this tournament with you guys. Have a good one.
Okay, see you. And then because it was quite fast, I missed it. This last indicator bit is going to be left over. In this case, it's pointing downwards, so it's not over, but it's going to be in the location in this column, so that if the last indicator bit was 1, it would be pointing up here. So blue would. So it would be over the silicon, over the sensor, so blue could detect it when it needs to. And it would have detected it there and gone up here to grab it, but in this case it's not going to. Red's going to go round once, and then blue's going to do some timing to wait for red to put the bit in the right position and grab it. So to clarify, red is moving this around and hitting sinks, while blue is waiting on sinks, the appropriate number of sinks, to be sure to grab the right bit. In this case it was 2 sinks. For the second bit. And when that's done, it can just put it towards the output. So quite simple, but very, very good implementation of the simple algorithm. You're not using many tricks, just really good Spacechem pathing to get this done, because as I said before, this is first reactors in almost entirely special case, which is not something you'd expect to do near this well in a symbols puzzle like this. I think this is decently fast as well. This loop unrolled sensing paradigm is a bit kind of cycles-esque almost. Yeah, you can see this one. This time it needs to go around and hit a few more sinks, so it's going to. You can really see red going around, shifting the position of the bit that's going to be swapped. And over to the output. So nice job, Darius1 on 4th place. So and also nice job, Darius on top 5. Next up we have Tough Thought on cycles on the symbols jump of 8 symbols less down to 1, 2, 2. Tough Thought is fairly similar and going to use a very simple algorithm. 1 second, find my notes for it. But what's most interesting about Tough Thought's solution is this first reactor. It's not particularly doing anything too strange, but it does it in a very clever way, or very unusual way. So Tough Thought's going to put a lot of things over the sensor in odd orders. So Tough Thought is not going to do group 1, group 2, group 3, or any such order of the groups individually. Tough Thought is going to do the first atom from group 1, followed by the first atom from group 2, followed by the first atom from group 3. And it's going to repeat it in a pattern like that. In this case, Tough Thought is going to keep 3 oxygen atoms, and those oxygen atoms are currently oxygen, but they'll be beryllium if Tough Thought detects that they need to swap parity. Now this oxygen is going to come up here. That detected not needing to swap, I think. This one is going to be swapped, so this is going to be split and put there. There's our output. Next, we're going to this is not being swapped, so that's fine. Put it down, and we'll go along to beryllium being swapped to see how that's done. Now this is quite slow. You're going round this whole loop up here twice for every bit you're checking, which is much slower than, say, how Darius1 did it. And that was a swapped beryllium there. So that beryllium got replaced by the oxygen that was brought in here. So you always grab the oxygen that comes in. If it detects that the one it's trying to compare to is an oxygen, it will swap it. If it's silicon, so a 1, counting 1. But if it's a nitrogen, it will go down here and not swap it. But if this is a beryllium, then it will grab this oxygen that's been swapped in, go up here, and then swap it if it was a nitrogen. So it's going to preserve whatever was there if it's a nitrogen, and it's going to swap whatever was there if it's an oxygen. Which is definitely a very unique way of doing parity checks that no one else has done. And this order here of passing over these senses is kind of magic as well. This ordering just seems to work for him, Tough Thought, and gets everything. So it's not an easy ordering Tough Thought has to do. They have to make sure they check bit 1 3 times, bit 2, 3, and 4 twice each, and bits 5, 6, and 7 only once each. And somehow this very simple looking set of halving and sinks manages to do that, and does it in such an order that you always get something from parity group 1, 2, 3. I believe the actual order is like 3, 2, 1, but it works out. Which is that's a pretty amazing thing to work out. I imagine again, like Darius 1, this took quite a bit of iteration to get down to. And then finally, this last reactor can just do a fairly conventional sensing pattern to work out what it needs to output, what it needs to swap or not swap. Yeah, first one checks this atom, and then we're going to check this atom, and then finally we check the final atom. And this series of sensors is going to appropriately direct the blue to grab on the correct square. And as far as I can tell, this here is largely special cased as well. There are some tricks of collapsing some of the cases that Tough Thought has found. So, for example, if it goes down this path, so beryllium, oxygen, something, and oxygen, not and oxygen, oxygen, it's going to end up going this same way and grabs in a different place, but can do the exact same thing. And we've simply got red hitting this nitrogen sensor to hitting on the sink, and then when it hits the sink, hit this nitrogen sensor, and then it will know whether it's a nitrogen or a silicon, and it will appropriately act. In this case, I think it's an oxygen, so it doesn't do anything, but if it was a nitrogen, it will go along here, input on beta here, and the grabbed atom will be here, and you'd fuse into it. If it was a silicon, you'd go up here, you'd hit the split would do nothing the first time, and then by timing you'd bounce back here to hit the split out with the right timing to split out. So I think the first this first one's going to want to split out here, so split there, pause on the output, and that is a completed molecule. So nice job, Tough Thought. Very well optimized solution. Good job on your third place finish. Next up, we have Team Chicxulub, which is a team of Brookios, Lazy Comet, and Rexkix, with their solution in second place. Down only a few symbols, only 4 symbols down to 118, and they again choose what's overall the simple algorithm that we've seen before. However, they again have a unique way of encoding their input. They do something we've seen before. I remember I distinctly pointed that out on Novice Fat Jam, the team of Anning May and That Margarita Kids solve, where you sent in pairs. So if they're the same, it's even parity. If they're different, it's odd parity. Team Chicxulub use the same approach.
Pardon me, Jojo.
Hi.
I thought our solution was 117 symbols. Did you add a pause somewhere?
I added a pause, yes. Sorry. Okay, 117, no problem. So beating Toughbot out by probably still 4 symbols, because I probably added a pause to it as well.
I think you did, yeah, no problem.
No worries, thanks for pointing that out. So how we're going to check is if it's wrong, we're going to keep the atom, but first we're going to split out of it. So we get silicon, we split out of it to get nitrogen. Next one is also going to detect it being wrong. It's going to fuse the nitrogen in, and then it is again going to split out to sodium. And the final one is just going to keep. Sorry, to see that again. So it's going to switch them between. It's going to fuse a nitrogen in if it's false, if it's correct, and a silicon in if it's not correct, and then split it to like divide it by 2 and make everything unique, because it's dividing the first. Essentially, it's dividing the contribution for the first one that goes in by 4 because it splits it twice, divides the second one that goes in by 2, and so splitting it once, and the third one is kept as either nitrogen or silicon, and that will uniquely get a combination. So that's kind of like counting in binary, but backwards in negative powers of 2 rather than positive powers of 2. Like, I believe it was whoever in the first solution who counted in positive powers of 2. Team Chicxulub find that if you count in negative powers of 2, it's easier because you're not having to input so much. You're just having to occasionally split. Much more simple, efficient. Yeah, and then that time it was correct, the last set of inputs, the last party group, so it's going to split out and you get a nitrogen from it. Now, finally, this reactor is just going to do something similar to what we've seen before in, say, Darius 1, solve where you're just going to iterate through the different atoms, and then once we get to the one we want, it's going to output it. So it's not got to it yet. In this case, we're counting backwards from what most solves do, so it's going to take quite a while to get to what would be the second going clockwise, but this is counting anti-clockwise. And each time it grabs the one it's a candidate for switching and passes it over this fuser, and that's a splitter, but it's detected nothing should happen, so it doesn't try to do anything. Now it's going to hit that argon sensor, and that argon sensor is detecting the bit 2, and bit 2 is going to then direct it over the appropriate number of sinks. So it's got one more sink, and then it has realized it's found the correct bit. It was a silicon, so on the sensor, blue passes upwards. It's this splitter. It's a split command, red's over the splitter, splits the silicon into a nitrogen, and comes over here. If it was instead a nitrogen, then blue would have gone down, hit the input, red would hit the fuse here, fuse the nitrogen into this nitrogen, and come up here. And that is it done. Blue now needs to hit one more sink to tell red to get it to the output, and that's done. It doesn't care in this case about orientation, so it can just leave it in whatever orientation it comes out. It doesn't need to worry about putting the oxygen back into the top left. And that's going to crash. Another good example of a simple simple algorithm well executed. It was very neat to find a counting in negative powers of 2 thing, allowing you to collapse your state down to a single atom, which means that this sensor right here is simpler than having to put multiple different atoms over the sensor and look for the same atom in multiple different timing delimited places. But doing it this way means you've got these 7 unique things you're sensing for, and absence of them all being the 8th for the 8 different states, and just run over the appropriate number of sinks. Simply just counter sync each time you need to go down a different path. Very nice and very simple, so quite simple, efficient. Yeah, nice job, Team Chicxulub, on your 2nd place. Up next, the winner of the tournament as a whole, we have GG Goal. So yes, that means no Andy this week, but GG Goal was slightly uncontested for overall tournament victor, but it didn't matter. They still won this week, despite that, and really claimed that victory. So GG Goal is going to go back to something quite a bit more complicated. Only a single symbol better, but quite a lot faster. They are both the fastest and lowest symbol scoring solve. And they're going to go back to something quite a bit more complicated, and that will be something quite similar to what Yellow Bunny did before. If you remember, Yellow Bunny switched atoms 4 and 5, and then used a bunch of nice symmetry properties rise after making that swap to detect exactly where the swapping atom needs to go by a series of rotations, rather than encoding the state and decoding it via like some encoding molecule. They're going to encode it just by rotating it and rotate it, and according to a series of sensors to get it into so that the atom you want to swap ends up in a deterministic place. Blue has first got some startup, so Blue's going to take this nitrogen and turn it into a beryllium. I suppose this is done so that it's not going to interfere with the sensors if it's a beryllium, because we're sensing for both silicon and nitrogen. So make it a beryllium, and it's not going to interfere with that. Then it's passed over this sensor at the top, and that's going to be used as a parity check. So beryllium over the sensor will be one of the parities, and beryllium off the sensor will be the other. And then it's going to do some amount of bouncing back and forwards here. So one thing that must have been a nightmare for GG Gold to do is this parity check here. It's very, very simple. It's very low symbol, but it requires a huge amount of Waldo coordination because there's no sinks in it. Every time that red puts something over a sensor, it will potentially trigger this thing to bounce back and forth. So red needs to always pass atoms over sensor for an even number of cycles, and it always must pass the same atom over the sensor for an even number of cycles. So if there was one bit of pathing where red had to get back through a sensor at one point, it would then have to either pause on there for a cycle or pass the same atom over another sensor at a different point. And this is made even more complicated by the fact that this molecule is going to get rotated into any orientation, so that oxygen is not necessarily where it is. And that's going to do, after it's already swapped the 4 and 5, so now going to do some sensing, swapping this beryllium appropriately. Now it detects the beryllium there. I think it then uses this middle sensor, this silicon here, as like a reset. So this sensing this beryllium here, it knows that the beryllium is not in the place it wants to be. So this silicon here is deterministic, so it resets it back here. That's another complication of this method, that it's after each parity check, the beryllium can be on either different place, and you always want to reset it, so you have to use this given atom here, pass this atom over an odd number of times, and pass everything else around it an even number of times to reset that beryllium in the top left. Going to do some more sensing. That's done. We'll see another input come through. It's doing the same. It's much harder to see compared to Yellow Bunny's solution, where everything is split out into different reactors. But it is doing the same thing, where it's, for the first parity check, it's rotating twice to add 4, and then using the rotational symmetry, twofold rotational symmetry of the second out parity check, and then rotating once more for offset by 2, and then the final parity check has 4-fold rotational symmetry, so it doesn't matter. So it could be in any possible rotation there, and it won't matter. And then from that point, the final parity check can be used as user translation, and the translation in this case will both reset the beryllium and set the state of this. So then it can be output and give a unique state just based on this molecule's positioning and orientation. Make that swap and add that. And now this beryllium is to check the first party group. So if the first party group triggers it, it will go up here and hit these two rotations. If the first party group returns true, it won't hit this beryllium, and it will go up here instead. going to work out. Do some re-grabbing to have always grabbed it by the bottom right corner. So actually we'll hit those 2 rotations twice if it hits if it has a beryllium, and it will hit it once if it has no beryllium. So which is back, uses that beryllium sensor to reset the state of the beryllium at the top using the middle atom, and this atom here gets passed. This atom here, sorry, gets passed twice over the sensor, so it has no impact whether it's nitrogen or silicon. This gets passed once, so it has the effect of resetting it. Now, if it had hit that beryllium sensor, it would have shifted this one across, which would have both reset it and changed the state of this. And actually, this beryllium sensor here, I missed it, but that's what checks the second parity group as well. So going right not only resets the state, it also avoids this rotation here, which it would have hit otherwise. And that would be equivalent to the adding 2 that we saw before. So, very impressive to work out all this pathing to get this all to fit inside one reactor. That's a huge amount of logic that's squeezed into just that red path. Really making sure to always reset, not trip the beryllium sensor to the beryllium too many times, as well as get all those rotates and make sure you're grabbing in the right position after you've done every rotate as well. So very impressive. And then next, it's a pretty simple job once you've got that and you've got the unique state come in. Easy to grab it, and now you know you're grabbing it in a deterministic atom relative to the one you want to swap. In this case, it's the one you want to switch. Switch it, and now you just need to do some refixing of the molecule first. It's going to have to get the molecule back into the right orientation, which most solves don't do, but this one needs to because it's swapped 4 and 5 at some point, so it needs to get it into the original orientation, so it knows which one are 4 and 5 to swap them back. And it just detects that with that oxygen sensor there. Once that's done, it reverses the swap on 4 and 5 with a bit of help from red, and goes down to output, and that's done. So yeah, really big congratulations on your first place of GG goal and first place in the tournament overall. This first reactor is pretty incredible, all the just stuff it manages to do with such little pathing. And yeah, really well done on finding as well as Yellow Bunny, that incredible symmetry between the incredible symmetries that arise when you swap atoms 4 and 5 in the chain. So yeah, very well done, a very impressive solve. Finally, but before we end, we have a couple of fun solutions, both from Yellow Bunny. So we got Yellow Bunny's normal single Waldo solution, and they've also provided a single reactor solution. I haven't looked at either of these, but they say that in typical Yellow Bunny fashion, they are adaptations of their scoring algorithm, just under the extra restrictions of single Waldo and single reactor for the other case. Yeah, this looks a lot like their scoring solve. Yeah, and looks like they're just going to obviously they got to do both the work on the same Waldo, so they're going to use oxygen as to check the state, swapping it between the different swappers. Instead of in their scoring solve, they used their other Waldo as like a two-state machine, going between an odd and even states. And that's detecting the first set is wrong, so rotate twice. It's also quite convenient that everyone chose to kind of mark a party group being wrong by a 1 or a presence, and a party group being none by not 1 in solutions that had such a concept of doing something when it's none. I don't think there was a particularly good reason that had to be the case. And this is going to be the same thing, but for party group 2. And they're also passing the oxygen through their reactors. One. Yes, quite expectedly, as a for single Waldo solve, this ends up being fairly slow. And we slightly missed it there, but this is going to hit this rotate 4 times to check these 4 different bits for party group 3. Checking that one now, and I think that's done, so checked all of them. And now this will have the unique orientation / position that will enable the Waldo in the next reactor to grab it in the correct place, and this looks almost identical to their scoring solve. Nice job for 158 symbols, which I think is fairly similar to the scoring. 144, so a little bit more than the scoring solve, probably quite a bit slower, so would have scored worse. Yeah, I believe Yellow Bunny at one point said that after working on the challenge solution, what they'd done to get it one order made it end up scoring better than their at the time best scoring solve. And finally, the only single reactor solution we've had. So, of course, making it single reactor was not possible for scoring solve because you had to use the given reactor. But for fun solve, you can do whatever you want. You can take it out. This looks tremendously complicated, but Yellow Bunny did say this is a single reactor implementation of the previous the algorithm we've seen. Yeah, you can see it swapping 4 and 5 there. And it's yeah, using lithium here as a state machine. The lithium on the sensor will be correspond to a flip, and lithium not on the sensor will be not a flip. Sorry. Lithium on the sensor will be incorrect, and lithium off the sensor will be correct. But so that's quite similar to how GG did it, but GG didn't use those sinks. So GG this is much easier to do it with sinks, as Yellow Bunny quite sensibly does for their single reactor solve. And then finally, Blue knows where it's got to be, so it's just got to find the space to path in, flipping that bit. And like GG had to deal with, an extra complication of doing this in one reactor is that you have to always make sure you're grabbing the molecule by something sensible, whereas in the multi-reactor solutions of their scoring and their one Waldo solve, they could just drop it wherever and then pick it up in a different place easily. Here they've got to, no matter whether they rotate it or not, do some dropping and grabbing, which adds complexity and is something you really don't need when you're doing it in one reactor. So very impressive Yellow Bunny to firstly find this algorithm, as I said before, and secondly to implement it in a one reactor fashion, alongside a very good scoring and single Waldo solve. I think that concludes the commentary from this round and the tournament as a whole. So, very well done, everyone. I will quickly find the final standings. Nice job to everyone who submitted solves. I know that some of the rounds this week, this last one included, round 3, possibly round 6 as well, were quite challenging and probably took up quite a bit of time. So, go through the top 10 in descending order. In 10th place, Zig, and 9th place, Brookios, who I believe joined the tournament late, but as part of his team Chicxulub, have submitted consistently very high scoring solutions since then. Next up, Spiritual Shampoo. Very well done on getting 8th place in I believe your first Spacechem tournament, but I think Spiritual Shampoo has been around a while in Opus Magnum, doing quite well there, but still very impressive to do it and get so high on your first Spacechem tournament. Next up, Darius 1. Very well done. And then in 6th place, we have Andy. Andy, who was in the battle for first until this final round where they didn't submit, but all the same, very well done, Andy, on keeping a set of really blowout scores quite early on in the tournament and maintaining a battle for the first position with GG Goal throughout. And then next up in joint 4th place, we have the permanent members of Team Chicxulub, Lazy Comment and Rex Kicks, who both submitted consistently high scoring solves to get this high up. And for the top 3, in 3rd position, we have Darius. Very well done. Next up, Tough Fort. And finally, our winner by quite a margin of 6 points is GG Goal, having been really consistently at the top of the leaderboard across all rounds of the competition and taking first place in the final round as well. So very well done, everyone. And I think that concludes the tournament. I will at some point, probably in a bit, make a small write-up just for posterity, but that's it. If anyone has any closing remarks, they can join the chat and give them. Okay. Goodbye.